this card, we're going to take the Emboss Resist technique and we're going to just tweak a few things. So firstly, I'm using some watercolor cardstock. And then once we're done embossing, once we're done adding the ink after we've embossed and whatnot, we're going to add some shimmer spray. Now, I made my own shimmer spray. This is just a little mister. It's got some water in it. And all you do is add just a little bit of mica powder to your water. So I'm using Perfect Pearls. I like it for this because it's got a binding agent that makes it work with water, that's activated with water. If you have mica powders that don't have a binding agent in them, you'd need to add, I think it's called gum arabic, in order to make this work for you. Or you could use an already pre-made shimmer spray. You just want something that is transparent because you want to be able to see the colors underneath there. So let's start with embossing our background. So once again, this background is a little bit bigger than the one that we're going to be using on the card. The reason for that is once it is all dried, I can cut it down to the size that I am wanting. So I'm going to take my watercolor paper. I'm going to choose the side that's got the least amount of texture. This is cold press watercolor paper, so it's got texture to it anyways. If you use hot press, that apparently doesn't have any texture to it. I don't have any, and I didn't want to buy any just for this project. But what I like about using the textured watercolor paper is that it adds just there's little cracks in there that are created with this watercolor paper. And to me, it just adds to the batik effect on this card. So I've got some stamping ink, Versamark ink on there. Let's add our clear powder. Tap the excess off and then put it on the other side. And once again, you can be liberal with the powder because anything that comes off is going right back, or anything that doesn't stick to ink is coming right back into the container. So we're not wasting anything. And now we heat it and melt the powder. All right, so now we're going to blend our ink. And you can put your colors wherever you want them to go. There's no rhyme or reason. You see how you get green in there by blending the two colors together. And then let's add some pink. And then when the pink goes over the blue, you get a little bit of a purple in there. Pretty much a rainbow card. And really, you could even do stripes to create a rainbow card if you wanted. If you wanted, you can make the colors a lot darker. I don't mind it like this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my shimmer spray and make sure that none of that mica has settled to the bottom. If it has, just shake it around a little bit. And I'm going to spray liberally. And that's going to rehydrate all those inks. It's going to help the colors flow together. Now I need to set this aside to completely dry. We can't do the next step until that is 100% dry. Just going to wipe the excess spray off. So those little mini misters are great for creating your own sprays. The only thing is if you have a very large project, it's very hard to get consistent batches. So they're appropriate for smaller projects or something that you didn't really care whether you had the same amount of mica in it or not. Now we're going to blend the bird while we've got our inks right here. But the one thing I wanted to do, I'm going to use a little bit of tape. I want to keep the bird's feet white. So I'm going to take some tape, I'm going to put it a little bit under that tail because I want to get some color on the tail. And the nice thing about the blending brushes is you get a nice gradation from light to, or from dark to light. And it just happens naturally. Oops. There we go. We can tuck our bird to the side. The last step, I'm going to stamp the little sentiment. I've got a little birdie told me here. I'm starting with one end with the pink, starting at the other end with the blue, and I do go over each other to kind of have a little bit of a blend in there. Again, you don't necessarily have to do that. I just thought the color blend was really cute. Nice and playful because the cards are fairly playful. And then we're going to trim this down. And then again on the other side. I'm just using the guides on my ruler here to try to keep it as straight as possible. There we go. And you could leave it like this, but I decided to use the ink pad to frame it. So all you do to frame it with an ink pad is I'm just rubbing it along the edge of the ink pad and just inks the edge of it in whatever color you're inking, in this case blue. There we go. So now that is ready. I'll see you once all of this dries and we'll continue. Right, so now it's time for the rest of the Batik background. So what you may or may not be able to tell is there's no more embossing on the sample card. So what we're going to do, I've got some newsprint here. I've got an iron set to cotton with no steam. That's already pre-warmed up. I'm going to put my background here between the newsprint. You could also use copy paper. I would use a couple sheets because it is going to go seep into the paper and you don't necessarily want it on your iron. And you're going to heat it up. So this is going to remelt that embossing powder and it's going to absorb into the newsprint. When you see Batik fabric, the resist is done with some wax. They do their drawing or their pattern or whatever with the wax, and then they iron it to get the wax back out. So you can see that the embossing has gone into my newsprint here. I'm just going to move it over. I'm going to do it again just to see if there's any remaining embossing there. You don't necessarily have to do this step. You could leave it as is, but it's just a fun, different twist on this technique. So there we go. No, there was no more embossing left, so I'm going to turn my iron off and set it to the side while it cools down. And we can get rid of this newsprint. This piece here, you can still use it for doing ink blending, doing sprays or whatever, so you don't necessarily have to throw that away just because it's got some embossing on it. I'm going to take my background here and cut it down to size. So for this card, I want it to be 3 3/4 by 5. I'm actually going to cut from all of the edges, just a little bit. So there we go. And now let's glue our pieces to our card together. So I've got my card base. This one here I did a tent card base. You could do the regular one where the fold is on the side too. That's going to work just fine. One second, make sure. My blue pieces sometimes were a little bit long, so I forgot to check and cut this one down. Actually, it's fine. These are all ones that I pre-cut a long time ago. I had a ton of this blue cardstock, so I just pre-cut a bunch of them. And it wasn't full sheets of cardstock, it was stuff that was cut down. And sometimes I forget to check the measurements to make sure they're what I'm wanting. All right, so that piece is down. I'm gonna do this on the bottom just because it kind of makes it look like ground since we're doing a little birdie sitting on it. And like I'm pretty sure I probably said before, you could do the ink blending in just one color, two colors. You don't have to necessarily use a bunch of different colors. But for the batik look, typically there's a few different colors blended together, and I just thought it would suit it very well. Now let's glue our bird down. This bird die doesn't actually have an eye to it, but if you wanted, you could absolutely do that. Just get a gel pen or whatever and draw one in. I don't mind that it's missing one. And then last but certainly not least, let's put some foam pop dots on our sentiment. Take the backings off of them. Sometimes that's the hardest part, is taking the backing off the tape. There we go. All right, and then I put it so that it's a little bit covering the bird. I mean, the sentiment is so long that you'd have to, but you could turn the card around if you didn't want it to cover. You could put your sentiment there and then your bird beside it. But there we go. A Batik Emboss Resist background. And that shimmer is so pretty with those colors. It just really catches the light.